We have here today with us Mr. Yaakov Schwarzberg.
That's right.
How did you get to Yad Vashem to give testimony?
Interview testimony. I came here to look for, they call it Rishimot from Vilna Ghetto. Like they had the, what they call the,
All the lists of the people?
I would say the Schindler lists, what they call that movie. So I was looking for also for the Vilna Ghetto, and I came to Yad Vashem to look for those lists. And then I came and talked to some people here, and they asked me to give an interview. What happened to me as a child in Vilna, where I was born.
So you were born 1934?
That's right.
In Vilna.
I was born 1934, September 20th in Vilna.
And what can you tell me about your family, parents?
My parents were well-to-do before the war. We lived on Chopina 3, which was a nice building, good neighborhood. They had a nice core there. I had a Polish governess. She took care of me. My language was Polish, and I spoke Yiddish also at home. And my father had business there.
What kind?
He had a transport business, expedition. He also was a supplier to the army. Supplied food and equipment to the Polish army. And also it came from my grandfather. It was a business which my grandfather and my great-grandfather also was in. For the Russian army and the Polish army, whoever was in occupation, my family supplied them with food and equipment. Food for their horses, food for the soldiers, and equipment.
So they were natives from Vilna, the parents?
My family, the way I understand, we were there at least 300-400 years in Vilna. Generations.
Your mother's side too?
My mother's side, not as much as my father's side. My mother's side were also many generations, but they came from Kharkov, which was in White Russia. And my father's family came from Leipzig, Germany. But that was many hundreds of years ago. Yes.
So school, did you manage to begin school?
No, I went only to the kindergarten. When the war started, I was 6.5 years old, in 1941, and I wasn't yet school eligible to go to school. School age. I had to go I was born in September, so I had to wait. The war, the Germans came into Vilna in 1941 in the end of June. Therefore, we were driven into the ghetto before I had a chance to go to school.
What kind of a kindergarten did you go to? Jewish or public?
No, I went to a Jewish kindergarten across the street from the building I lived in, on Chopina 3, which is across the street, as I remember. Had to cross the street with my mother holding my hands, and I didn't like that. I used to go across. I told her to leave my hand go, and that I remember.
What kind of a home do you come from? Religious?
We came from a traditional home. Shabbat, my father went to the Bet Knesset, to the synagogue, had Kiddush in the house. We had kasher, with kosher. And we lived in a very traditional home. Saturday, Shabbat, didn't work. Like I said before, they went to the synagogue, and I learned also by a rabbi, a melamed they called it at that time, Chumash, which was before the starting of school.
At home?
He came in over to teach me my own, yes. I didn't go to Cheder. We were well-to-do, so he came to teach me in the house.
You were
How to write and read in Yiddish and also in Chumash and Aleph Bet, like with you, every child starts out.
You were an only child?
I was the only child, yes.
So your mother was also in the business?
My mother helped in the business, yes. She was active in the business. She was a bookkeeper, and she helped my dad in the business. The whole family worked. And I stayed home with the governors.
You had contact with neighbors, Jews or
I went
non-Jews?
downstairs and played with all the... In this court we lived on Chopin 3, mostly 50 or 60% of the people were Jewish, maybe more. So there were children there. And we played downstairs with Jewish children. I had Jewish friends, which I was born with, you know, in the same court. There was about 80 apartments there in that court house, in those two buildings, so there was a lot of children there. Yes.
And do you remember contact with non-Jews, anti-Semitism?
Yes, I remember that well, because in 1941, when the Germans came in, I remember used to be a Lithuanian that had a little girl that used to come to play in that courthouse, in the court there. Not the courthouse, in the court, outside, in the yard. And I played also, that little girl came. Her father was like doing some labor there for those people that lived in that building. And also the superintendent, he was helping the superintendent. He was Lithuanian. And I saw how he beat on a Jewish person. This was in 1941 when the Germans came in that yard. How he ran up to him with another Lithuanian. And I remember this person, because I know that I knew him from the little girl that I played with. And how he beat on the Lithuanian, how he beat on the Jewish older, elderly person that had a beard. I don't know if it was a rabbi or not. He beat on and hit him and dropped him on the floor. And I thought to myself, Shema Yisrael, I said to myself. How can that kind of thing happen? And I called out to him, he ignored me. He ignored me. I called out in Polish to him, why are you doing it? And he ignored me. He made with his hand a motion, and then they dragged that poor Jew away. Have a life. He was bleeding from his mouth and from his ears. It's a terrible scene. This is the first time I saw real anti-Semitism, real how a non-Jew, a Lithuanian, was beating and torturing a Jew.
Until then, you didn't feel anything?
Till then, I didn't feel any anti-Semitism. I was maybe too small to feel it. I didn't see it, and I didn't feel it.
And also at home, it wasn't a topic, not in front of you.
No, the Polish people weren't that anti-Semitic in Vilna, which I thought. But I was wrong, because after the war and during the war, I saw how they were, too. They were also hating the Jews, and they like to see the Jews all get murdered and killed so they can possess their belongings. They were cooperating willingly, especially the Lithuanians. Not as much as the Poles, but the Lithuanians were willingly cooperating with the Germans. Since the German army entered Vilna in 1941 in the end of June 41. As a child, I didn't remember dates afterwards. I only remembered winter, summer, spring, and fall. That's what I remembered. And I know it was summertime.
Did your father have any position in the Kehillah before the war?
No, he was a businessman. As a young person, he played in the Maccabi soccer. And that's the only thing. He wasn't active in any organizations in Vilna. The only organization he was active is in the Maccabi Sport Club. Mm-hmm. And also he He belonged to a synagogue there where he went to pray on the high holidays.
Do you know which one?
I remember which one it was, yes. It's not existing anymore. It's not there. I remember my grandfather's synagogue. He took me once during Simchat Torah. It was the Korshu, they call it, on Zavalne, Korshu, where my grandfather from my mother's side prayed, davened. And I remember that synagogue from then. He took me Simchat Torah, Akofes. That's the only thing I remember from that time. Maybe it was 1940, something like that. It wasn't in 41. It wasn't when the Russians were already in Vilna. The Russians came into Vilna in 1940, I believe. 40 or 39. They came and they became a Lithuanian republic there. It was a mixed up thing that didn't interest me that much, which
You didn't feel it in your surroundings.
that's right. I didn't feel that much difference. But I knew there was war there. I remember my father in 1939 when he came back from the Polish army. You know, he was in prisoner of war, how he came in. I remember that.
They took him a prisoner?
Yeah, he went to war in 1939. He was an officer in the Polish army. And I don't remember him going, but I remember him coming back. When he came back in his uniform, still uniform he had when he came back from the war, he ran away from the camp of war, prisoner of war.
He ran away.
That's right. He escaped he was captured in Ostrolenko. He told me that story, how he was captured, and he came to, and then how they treated the Jews in the prisoner of war, the Germans, how they made fun of them, of the Jews, how they separated them from the rest of the soldiers, how they took a tall Jew with a short Jew, made them run to amuse themselves. He knew that the Germans were out there to kill us, but not to, let's say, to annihilate all the Jews like a mass murder. Nobody believed it. He knew that we were going to go through hard times with the Germans. But nobody believed that such a thing could happen like what they did to us. Mass murder and all that.
So nobody really thought of trying to escape?
Well, some people, my uncle for instance, in 1941, he was a youngster of 15, he took his bike and he escaped to Russia on the way when the Germans were close to Vilna already.
And he made it?
He made it there, and he was in Russia there, in Siberia. He was arrested, whole story with him. Then he came back to Poland. Two of my uncles actually. One uncle escaped in 1939 through Baranovich, and he was arrested there in Baranovich, and he was deported from there to Siberia, and that's how he survived. My uncle Yosef. My uncle Leib, he escaped from Vilna. You know, he left his parents at home. No, just one uncle stayed with my parents, with my grandfather and grandmother, which lived separate from us in a different neighborhood. Like I said before, near Zavalny there. They lived not too far from there.
Mm-hmm. But your father didn't think of...
My father didn't know, he was thinking about where to run, how to run, you know. We went to the train station, but the train stations were full. People were, hundreds were there, thousands. There was no way to run away. There was, I don't know, it was just like closed up.
That was already in 41?
This was in 41, before the Germans, when the war broke out between Germany and Poland and Russia. Actually, in 1939, as you know, the Germans and the Russians made a pact, the Molotov Pact, when they divided Poland between themselves. And that's why Vilna became Russian at that time, and then became Lithuanian. They put up a puppet government in Lithuania. And then they came back again. They saw that the Lithuanians were not that loyal, so they came back in they made some kind of provocation, and they came back and they occupied Vilna again, the Russians. And they had the Russian rule there, where all the rich people were deported out. They wanted to deport my grandfather too, but he somehow got out of it. And my mother was supposed to get deported too, but we got out of it. Maybe it would have saved a lot of people's life, the deportations. But some people afterwards perished there in Siberia. Deported, these rich
And
people.
they were all taken to Siberia.
They were moved out to Siberia, and they were arrested in families, and they exported them to Siberia, as they say, you know.
But you felt already the war. Food, was there shortage already?
I already felt shortages already in 1939. However, we used to go to grandmother, and my uncles used to bring us food. When my father went to war already in 39, used to be shortages in food and supplies. However, when the Russians came back into and occupied Vilna, food was available. Life returned to normal. The only thing, they confiscated everything. They confiscated my father's trucks, everything, his business, and he had warehouses full of goods. They were all confiscated.
You still went to the kindergarten till 41?
Yes, and still went to the kindergarten, but it was like we had it wasn't a steady thing. It was a couple months, you know. Like I remember till 1940, I went to the kindergarten. In 41, I think the kindergarten stopped. There was no more kindergarten there.
So what would you do all day long?
Downstairs playing. Downstairs in the yard with the other children running around. Also the rabbi, the Melamed, stopped coming to us, you know, was already stopped learning at that time already.
But there weren't any restrictions yet for the Jews?
No, there wasn't restriction. There were, that I knew about. But the commissars, some of the Jewish people were commissars there. They were helpers, you know, like they were communists, and they used to help the Russians confiscate stores and goods, and they used to inform on people there. That I remember.
They come to your house?
No, they didn't bother us for some reason, but they bothered a lot of people that I knew. Their stores were nationalized. They came inside and they nationalized the stores, took all the merchandise out. And it wasn't a good sight, you know.
Do you remember what feeling you had at that time, seeing these things?
Actually, I didn't have that much of a feeling. You know, I only heard the stories, you know, and I didn't have contact with it, so it didn't affect me. But I was affected with it later on, you know, when I heard about it. When I grew up, you know, after the war.
After
That affected me, yes. I saw why did they interfere, the Jewish communists, commissars, what did they have to do with all this? They shouldn't have interfered and should have left things alone. Why did they cooperate with the Russians, you know? I didn't think there were that many, but there were a lot. And they weren't in the higher class people. They were like the tailors, the cobblers, you know, which want to become rich, you know, without working hard. As I say, get a lot of favors and other things, you know, money and goods and good position, without really working too hard for it, you know. That's it.
Do you remember the day the Germans came in?
I remember the day when the Germans came in, when I saw the Germans march in with their boots, and I heard on the cobblestones how they marched, and I saw them. And the fear came through me, you know. I had some kind of fear. But I looked at it, you know, I want to see how it looks. It interested me. I am really saw, and I saw a lot of prisoner of war Russians going and singing, and I thought maybe I didn't really understand what's happening, or the Russians are still here, but nobody guarded them. They were walking, singing. I saw that uniforms weren't as clean, nothing, but actually I got confused a little bit when I saw that. Really did. But then I saw that what's happening, They start getting shortage in food. The Lithuanians became organized squads in capturing Jews to work. They did it voluntarily. They helped the Germans, they actually did more of the capturing and torturing and running and all that and bringing the people to work, hard work, hard labor, where they took him to work. They captured them in the streets. Some were never saw him return. They took him, and afterwards I found out about it. I didn't know at that time. They were taken and shot, murdered in Panar, which was outskirts of Vilna, a forest with big holes there, dug up in the craters, like the sides of craters, which were dug up there. Afterwards, I found out that these craters were prepared by the Russian army to hide over there different equipment from the Germans. But they didn't. No equipment was hidden there. The Germans used those big holes, these dug out holes. They used them to murder the Jews in and bury them there. They used to walk on the edge. They shot them. They fell in there and into these big holes, these graves, and some were even buried alive. Some people that escaped from there came back to the ghetto and told the story. Not too many, but some did.
So that was even before people were taken to the ghetto, or once you were in the ghetto?
This what I'm talking about is afterwards that I knew about it. I didn't know what happened to those people at that time. They were disappeared. They just disappeared. For instance, I'll give you an example. A week after the Germans entered Vilna, which was already about July, my grandfather was taken. Some Lithuanian Gestapo came over to my grandfather with the Germans, and they told my grandfather to get dressed, take some towel with him, soap, and a little suitcase, and he was taken for interrogation and held as hostage because they wanted to hold some of the people for hostage in case there were Germans resistance. The resistance would kill Germans, but actually nothing happened like that. They would make provocations. What I want to say is that my grandfather was taken, and I never saw him again. At that time, not only he was taken, a lot of Jewish people, Jewish rabbis, dignitaries, elderly people, and even I think non-Jews were taken, and we never saw them again. We didn't know what happened to them. We thought at first they were taken, held in jail, but actually what we found out later on, that they were taken and murdered in Panar, killed. These people. Mm-hmm. What they did systematically murder. They killed first, they took the dignitaries, the heads of the Kehila, the heads of the society, from different organizations, and they were taken and they were murdered. Also, as at the time between the Germans entered and before the ghetto, they had people wearing white stars on their clothes, Jews, and then yellow stars, and they were not allowed to be after 6 o'clock curfew. and they were not supposed to walk on the sidewalk, and they're not supposed to organize themselves, to be more than 10 people or 5 people together. I don't know exactly the number. Actually, no more than 5 people were not supposed to be together. If they were caught, they were arrested, and as we know today, as I knew now and today and then, I didn't know it, but afterwards we knew it, that they were murdered. They were taken to murder. Now, before the ghetto, they took out whole streets, portions of Vilna, and they took them straight to Pana. They did this systematically. They did this with the help of the Lithuanians. We couldn't do nothing. Couldn't organize ourselves. The Lithuanians were happy to do it. They were enjoying to kill, and they took all the rechush, which you called all the belongings, the apartments, everything they robbed and took away from the Jewish people, and they killed them too. So procedure went on, same thing all the time, till September of 19, which is about a month and a half, 2 months after the
Germans
came in. We were all notices went out.
So you, till that time, you wouldn't leave the apartment anymore?
I used to stay mostly in the house. They came to look for my father. They were chapunas, they called them. Chapunas. They caught people, and I remember as 2 Lithuanians walked into my apartment looking for my father. My father escaped through the window in the back. He jumped downstairs, about the floor down, we lived the first floor, which is a floor down. From the back of the house, they used to have an alley there with a big garden in the back, with the fruit garden, a fruit where they had apple trees and everything in the back, but they had an alleyway there. He jumped out through the window, and the Lithuanians came right in, and they saw my father's watch. They took it away. It was laying there, and they looked for all kinds of things, and they walked out. They told me, "Where's my father?" I said, "I don't know." And they walked out from the apartment.
Your mother wasn't home then?
My mother wasn't home. It was in the morning, I remember. It's very difficult, but not yet like it was in the ghetto. It was still, we were still outside. We still lived, I wouldn't say it normal, but for me it wasn't that terrible.
And this Polish governess, surely she had to leave.
She left. She was gone. The governess left when the Russians came in 1940. I think 41 or 40. She was gone already. 1940, I think. We didn't have her anymore. Governess. And we had a maid too. My mother had a maid. She used to wash the clothes. Cooking, my mother did herself. Wash clothes, at that time you didn't have wash machines. So all the ironing and all this, we had a maid, and we had a governess that took care of me. But in 1940, all that stopped. No more.
After that, your father, he didn't hide. He was just once, he was lucky he could run away.
We're talking about 40?
41 now.
41.
You're saying now before they came to fetch your father?
Yeah, not only they came to look for him. They looked for men. They were catching men taking them for work or whatever. They took him to death too. Sometimes they never returned, like I said to you. Mm-hmm. They called them chapunas. They grabbed the people off the street.
Lithuanians?
Lithuanians did that. Lithuanian bands where they had armbands on them, with this swastika. And they didn't wear uniforms even. They did it voluntarily. They were volunteers to catch and bring the men, catch them on the street and bring them to hard work, labor. And also some of them, sometimes they took him to be shot. according to orders from the Germans, I think it was. The Germans had plans how to do it. But mostly Lithuanians, not that many Polacks. The Polish boys and children used to identify Jews on the street, say Jude, Żyd. This was already after the afterwards, you know, after the ghetto already. The people were in the ghetto when they were not allowed to be outside. They informed on Jews, but at that time, before the ghetto, between June and September, before we were driven to the ghetto, when all these degrees were out there against the Jews, the Lithuanian did the dirty work. That's it.
So your father wouldn't go in the street anymore?
He told me that he saved his life one time when he ran into the synagogue where he prayed, and he hid there. When they were looking for him, you know, and he couldn't. The people were afraid to go on the streets. So you had to get food, and this was difficult to obtain food because they couldn't go out and get the food. They couldn't stay in the house too. They came looking for people in the house too. They were constantly chased and looked for. It was under terror we lived.
But for women, for your mother, it wasn't so dangerous.
The women they didn't grab, so she's the one that brought the food actually. But at that time, yes, she went to my grandmother there in the morning, where my grandfather and grandmother lived. They had a big courthouse. They had a big apartment, a yard there, and she came over there. They had food storage away in the basements. My grandparents did, so there was a lot of supplies there. They prepared themselves. So we used to get food from the grandparents. My uncle, the youngest uncle, which ran away, he wasn't there anymore. And so my mother had to go and bring the food. In 1939, he used to bring the food to us and the other uncles. But now only my mother did that. She went and brought food, whatever she could bring from my grandparents. And they lived on Baziliansky Street, near, I don't know exactly, I know where it is, but I don't remember now. I don't remember where it was. I didn't visit there after the war. I know that building, in 1944, we went by there with my father, and that building was all burned down, bombed out, where they lived.
So then came the decree to go into the ghetto.
The order and the decree came to go into all the Jews were supposed to go to the ghetto. So we took each one, I took a little pillowcase, put my belongings in there, and my father took a suitcase, and my mother took some sheet, and they put stuff in there, and we were early in the morning, and we marched to the ghetto with all the rest of the Jews. And we went to the ghetto. From the ghetto, it was like to me it was like a long walk, but actually it's not that far away. And we walked, and we walked by a church. I remember that, on the right-hand side, big church, and the poles were standing there and crossing themselves. Because I looked like, I was blonde and blue-eyed. I looked very like a Gentile child. And they crossed themselves over, you know, they made a cross sign. And that I saw, you know. I looked back like this, and I saw that. With my little pillowcase that I had my belonging in there. And we walked into the ghetto. We walked into the ghetto, I remember, and we went into a Spitalna Street in the ghetto. That street was in inside the ghetto, a couple streets inside the ghetto, from the gate, the ghetto gate. And we went into an apartment there with, there was about 4 families in each room, 4 or 5 families in each room. Very crowded, very hungry, no facilities to wash, no facility for toilet, very little food. I was constantly hungry. We were there for about 2 weeks, as I recall. And I remember from the other side, there was a big yard there inside the house where we lived. So outside a court, a yard. I remember hearing the Germans from the other side, which was, I didn't know exactly what street it was, but it was the ghetto. That gate was outside the ghetto. That gate was where you could see the outside of the ghetto. I walked over there and I saw the Germans march and sing their songs, you know, with their jackboots and all that, through that closed gates in there. That I remember very well. And my father went out to work. He worked on the train station.
That was forced or
forced labor?
volunteered?
Forced labor. Everything was forced labor. Nobody volunteered for nothing there. They organized the police. The Jewish Judenrat organized police. I saw already policemen there, you know, in the ghetto. I didn't have any contact with them at all, but they were there already. So, you know, and my father, he went out to work, you know, and then he came back in the evening, and my mother at that time didn't work, and I used to go outside and see what's going on outside.
You could walk around freely in the ghetto.
In the ghetto, there was already no catching, you know. Only Jews lived there. There was no, very crowded, no hygienes. I don't remember taking a bath even, you know. Bad conditions. And then they came out that they were going to, they had 2 ghettos at that time. They had the first ghetto and the second ghetto, as I recall. And then they had an action.
Where were you?
We were in the first ghetto. And my father received a white shine permit, which called a permit, a white permit that he's working. Then a yellow permit. But my grandmother was also with us in the ghetto. My grandmother. My uncle, the oldest uncle, Eliyahu, he perished before the entrance of the ghetto. We didn't know actually what happened to him at that time. One of the streets, he went to visit a family there, which was taken directly to Panar, not to the ghetto. They were driven right to Panar, or driven in trucks, or by foot. I don't know how he got there.
And he happened to be there for a visit.
He went to visit, and that street.
And he was taken.
And he was taken there, and he would never enter the ghetto. Then, at that time, those people that had these yellow permits were told to leave the ghetto and go to their workplaces with their direct families. Only the children and the wife. No other people. 3 to 4 people in a family. My grandmother didn't have a shine. They called it shinen. Didn't have a permit. She wasn't even written in our permit. So we decided not to leave. We decided to hide, to stay there. We hid ourselves in a cellar where they had a store upstairs.
When was that?
This was in September. In September, right after 2 weeks, I think, after we were in the ghetto.
You were in the ghetto?
Yes. They had made an action. They wanted to clear Jews out of the ghetto, to thin them out.
So they called you down to a certain place, or how did you do this Aktion?
Aktion, which was, they told the people that had these permits, yellow permits, they called them Gelbe Scheinen, to leave the ghetto, to go to their workplace with their families.
When did they give this Scheine?
They gave it in the workplaces. Oh. Each one that worked in a Einhaut, they called it in German. Einhaut.
Einhaut.
Yeah. They called it an Einhaut. A workplace. A place where you worked. That place of work that employed you, gave you that those permits. I think, I don't know exactly, through the Judenrat maybe, I don't know. I don't know really how they got the permits, but they each my father had a yellow shine, yellow permit. And we could have left the ghetto. But we couldn't leave the ghetto because my grandmother was with us.
Which grandmother was that? From your mother or your
my
father's?
Mother's side. My mother's grandmother's, my father's mother, she passed away way before the war. She passed away in 1929, I think, or 28. Way before. And my grandfather also passed away in 1932, I think he passed away. I was named after my grandfather, Yanko, Zichrono Levacha, who, Avi Alav Shalom. I was named after him. My name is also Yanko, Yaakov. And they weren't alive, you know, they died before that. So the only grandfathers I knew was from my mother's side. My grandmother Tzipe, Avi Alav Shalom, and my grandfather Isaac, Avi Alav Shalom, Zichrono Levacha. That's the only grandparents I knew. The other grandparents weren't alive when I was born. So I'm talking about my grandmother from my mother's side, Tzipe. And we hid ourselves in a cellar in a store not too far away from that apartment we lived, the house where we lived. And we were there, and we heard the Lithuanians running around outside and howling and capturing Jews outside the ghetto, inside the ghetto, outside the hideout we heard it. And we were there a couple hours, you know. Towards the morning, we had a baby with us, a child, and he started crying very badly. And they heard the crying, and they broke into the cellar, and they took out maybe 40 people.
So many people were hiding there?
Yeah, we were hiding inside, one on top of the other. It's hardly room to sit down. And we were driven from that area, from Spitalne towards Rudnitska Gas. And my father held my hand, and we tried to escape from the group as we were walking. It was this you couldn't imagine how, when they broke in, how I felt, how my heart, you know, my stomach went into my heart from fear, you know, because I knew that we were going to be done something with us, killed. We already knew that they were murdering us out, killing the Jewish people of Vilna. And the Lithuanians, and this was like a store, you know, a haberdashery store. When they sold curtains also, they had these little rings that they hung curtains on. My father had a handful of those rings, you know, in his hand. And he says to the Lithuanian, to him, I'll give you these gold rings, this gold, let us go. And the Lithuanian looked at these rings, and then he saw they weren't rings, they wasn't gold. And he took his bayonet and he made like that. We weren't ready to leave the group in one of these little streets there. And we were walking towards the gate of the ghetto. And then a German, I think it was Weiss, I don't really remember the name well. A German, Mura or Weiss or something like that. And my father ran up to them and showed them that he has a yellow permit. That they were taking us, but he has a yellow permit. This means he has a permit to live. And then he looked at the permit. My father spoke German, somehow, somewhat, you know. And Yiddish German, you know. And they let the whole group go. They told the Lithuanians just before we went out through that gate, and they let the whole group go. The German made a motion with his hand, and the Lithuanians let us all go.
For leaving the ghetto?
Before, if we would have been across the gate, from the ghetto gate, we were taken to death, to the Gestapo. He let us go, and we survived with the grandmother. You know, this was the first miracle that happened to me. Some miracles happened to my father beforehand, but never to me. You know, to me it was like a miracle. You know, and that's what happened. Yes. Couple weeks later.
So where did you go from there?
We went back to that apartment.
To that apartment?
Yes.
All the families together?
All the families that were hidden there, and the child that was crying, and everybody. We were saved. At that minute, for that time, we were saved. We went back to the apartment, and then as the couple weeks went by again, I think maybe less, and then they told us to go in. They told us to go into the to the other ghetto.
To the second ghetto.
To the second ghetto. The second ghetto, they moved those people out, took them to death, to Panar. From the second ghetto. I think the second ghetto existed 6 weeks. Sahako. Total time. 6 weeks. But we were taken to the second ghetto. We were there a couple days, and we were returned back to the new ghetto, to the first ghetto. And we came to the first ghetto, and we didn't go back to that apartment on Spitalny. We went to live on Rudnitska. We were assigned an apartment on Rudnitska Street, and we lived there from the 41 October, I think it was. Maybe it was the holidays there.
Still as crowded as before?
Not as crowded, but also crowded. But more, we had already a toilet there, you know. There was an apartment with several rooms, with one toilet, and each room lived 3 to 4 families, according to the size of the room. We lived in the living room, and we had there 4 families in that room there. 4 families lived. And then my grandmother was there too, with us. And we divided it up at night. We slept on the floor, or we took apart a closet and slept on the bottom of the closet. I remember, and the apartment full of bugs, Wanzen. I remember I couldn't sleep at night. The Wanzen crawled on the ceiling and they used to drop. And the toilet there, you know, so people divided up their work. Each one washed the toilet every day. Each family had to do it according to their time they had to do it too. You know, they divided up, you know, between the families which family had to wash which days. My grandfather did it, my grandmother did it, my mother did it, and my father and mother went out to work.
Your mother too?
Yes, my mother went out to work. She worked in a garden at that time.
Outside the ghetto?
When we were a couple months in Rudnitska, she didn't, but afterwards, I think she went to work in March of that year, 1942, she already went to work. And that she stayed in the ghetto. I really don't remember, you know, that time, exactly the times.
What kind of a garden did they have in the ghetto?
Not the ghetto. They went out to work slave labor outside the ghetto. The Gentile people had gardens there, you know, garden, fields, vegetables, and they worked there, slave labor. And my father worked on the train station, hard labor, you know, chopping wood, bringing water, taking out wounded from the trains, washing train boxcars. They used the trains. They used to be, Vilna was a transit station where they came from the front. They had to take the wounded out, and they came to rest there in the train stations. So they had to do all kind of labor, bring potatoes, all kind of hard labor work without getting paid nothing. You know, slave labor, only little food. They were happy to do it because they could get a little food and bring it into the ghetto. And this was risky too. Sometimes they searched when they came back. They came in groups. See, individual people couldn't walk from the workplace, from the Einheit. They had to work in groups, and they had a Kolonnenführer. One of the person was in charge, a brigadier, you know, they called it. That used to be in charge of the group, and the group marched, you know, walked.
This was a Jew who was in charge?
Yes, a Jew. One of the Jews was appointed. He wasn't a cop or nothing. He was appointed by that person. Where they worked, they had the managers were Poles or Lithuanians there in the train station there, where they worked in those cellars.
How were they treated at work?
Afterwards, you know, they knew each other. You know, these people knew each other. They weren't treated well, but they weren't respectful towards them. If you think, they were told to work, and they had to work. You know,
but not beaten up.
They weren't beaten. No, the Poles didn't beat them, or the Lithuanian didn't beat them. You know, in that time, he was told to do the certain jobs, and they were doing it. They told the Jewish foreman, the brigadier, and he gave the jobs to others. And each one did their work. And at night, late at night, they left early in the morning and came late at night back to the ghetto. And they went through the gate. They were searched sometimes. It was dangerous. When they found food on them, they used to get beaten up by, you know, they used to get straps with the holes, with rubber holes. And sometimes when the Gestapo was there, they were taken to Gestapo, interrogated, and then shot, tortured and shot. So it was an ordeal. But from 1942 to 43, in ghetto was some kind of a normal life, as you can call it, normal life. We went to school. At school there, yes, I went to the first grade. And
that was official or hidden?
It was official. Official school. I went to the first grade there, and my grandmother, Zichrono Levacha, she hired a melamed, a rabbi, brought food. She worked also outside. She worked in the slaughterhouse, slave work, outside the ghetto. And she brought in food with her, and she gave to this rabbi, you know, and he taught me how to read and write in Yiddish and Chumash. He taught me in the ghetto. She told me, maybe you'll stay alive, so you'll know. They were education conscious, those people, the grandparents.
What language was this school in?
In Yiddish.
And a lot of children were there?
Only Yiddish.
A lot of children came?
Children came, and we had, they brought some sandwiches with them too, you know, in school, and they would steal each other's sandwiches. You know, some people had better food, some, you know, everybody was hungry. I was in the first grade, but we had one book for 10 people. We used to give us to read, you know, a line, and used to pass the book around. No papers, no pencils, no books. You know, one book, you know, everything we read, you know, sentence in Yiddish. And they had a theater. I remember theater they had in Vilna. Theater, where it was, I remember too. And my grandma used to give me money, and I used to buy a ticket. And I used to keep my ticket, you know, ahead for 6-7 weeks ahead. To me, it was like a long time ahead. I used to put the ticket inside the coat, which my father kept in case a nice coat he had, Shabbos coat, that he kept, that maybe we need to sell it, you know, for food. So I hung there on the wall over the place where we slept, and I used to put the ticket inside the pocket there, in the east side pocket, so it would stay in a safe place. I used to get the ticket in the last rows, you know, where I could only stand up and see. And I learned all those little songs in the ghetto, you know, in theater.
And people would go to the theater?
The theater was full. It's full. It's really full of people. And we used to go out in the streets, and I met some of my friends that I was born, you know, that I thought weren't already, his father, this little friend I had, his father never came back from the war, the Polish War, Polish-German War. And I met him in the ghetto. And his mother married over there one of the Judenrat Jews, or she was she was a concubine there. I don't know really, you know. Anyway, I came over there to their apartment, the Judenrat there, and where they lived, they ate well, so they used to offer me, and I was very happy to come there. And then I used to run around with this little boy, Bobby they called him, as I remember. And I used to run around in the ghetto. And we used to go see different things, you know, what people do. They even had one time, I remember, in the ghetto between 1942 and 43, they caught some thieves, you know, where they robbed Jewish people. They robbed, the police caught them, and they had over there what they call Yad Kevargas, where they had the wholesale butchers stores in Vilna. In the ghetto, the street was Yad Kevargas. Right there was also the Katzovish shul there.
Oh, the
Katzovish shul there. I remember that shul too, because also that Melamed that took me for Hakofes and Simchas Torah there too, to that shul. So I remember that shul too, you know. He took me to that, I'm going to go back to these people that they were caught by the police robbing, and I think they also murdered somebody there. Anyway, the kangaroo court, or whatever you call it there, in the ghetto, condemned them to death. And the Germans came to see the execution. The Germans, the Gestapo, came into the ghetto. The Jewish police hung those people up, strung them up on meat hooks. I remember seeing that, you know, how they strung him up and how they hung there for a couple of days. You know, this was still remember it. Did
your parents let you go and see?
My parents weren't there. I was like a free bird there. My parents went out to work. See? There was orphans there also. We went stealing bread with the orphans, you know. I wanted to be one of the boys, you know. I was a thin little boy, so they had me one time climb up. They had on a drain pipe from a rain drain pipe, you know. And I climbed up on it onto the first floor. Also in that area where that Yad Kevargas was, they had a warehouse there for bread. I climbed up, and my head went through those bars. Between the bars, I was so thin. I went through the bars, and I started throwing down bread to them. And then the Jewish police, the Yiddische Polizanten, the Jewish police, caught me, and they, with the other 2-3 children, we were caught. The bigger children ran away; they took off. But me, they caught, and they caught 3-4 more, and they took us to the commissariat, they called it. You know. As I was telling you, when I was caught up there in the warehouse for the bread, I went through those bars, and the big boys that we were the group, you know, like a gang, we went to steal bread, you know, in the ghetto. To us, it was like not stealing, it was surviving, you know. The bread belonged to the ghetto. Anyway.
So you were caught, and?
I was caught and taken to the headquarters, police headquarters on Rodnitska, I think it was. And we were 4 boys, yes. We were caught, we were put in a corner on a little stage, wooden stage, like a stage they had, interrogation stage. And the person in charge, the policeman in charge, the Yiddischer Poliziant, he decided to give us each one 10 whips with a rubber hose. And he said each person should whip the other. And I was like, I was the third one in row, you know. So, or the second one, I was second one in row. And the first one got whipped, he cried, and he left. You know, he got his 10.
So who whipped the first one?
Not me. I don't know, the other boy. I did it. And then my turn came. When my turn came, another boy whipped me, and it told the policeman, said, harder, starker, harder. And he whipped me, and then he asked me, did it hurt? I said, no, I didn't cry. When I said no, he said, give him some more. Then I started crying. Understand? I was stupid, you know, a little bit. You know, I was like proud, you know. That time afterwards, I felt maybe I was stupid, not proud. You know, and you know, it was my personality like this, you know. I said, it didn't hurt. And then he told, give him some more. Anyway, I got more, and then I started crying, and they let us go. And it's lucky they let us go, because if they wouldn't let us go, the Gestapo would come and take us, and we were being sent to the headquarters Gestapo. From there, we would have been killed, for sure. That's what happened to people that get caught in the ghetto doing some kind of a crime, which happened to a lot of people, you know, in the ghetto. If the Germans found out that you did some kind of a thing like that, steal, they would find an excuse to execute, to kill, to murder. Now let's go further, you know, away from that area.
I want to know. I wanted to ask you actually, the bread was distributed or sold?
The bread was supposed to be distributed, but they somehow sold the bread. Some of the bread was distributed, some were, you know, the Judenrat was in charge with the Jewish police there, and they had the administration, and the supplies were partly sold, partly distributed, and that's what happened.
What else was distributed on food?
Some kind of, actually I really don't know what, because I never received it. My parents did receive. I don't really know what was actually redistributed there.
By the work they got?
I don't really know. I know they brought in food, where it came from, how it came, you know, some food, you know. When the ghetto was open to people to leave to work, we had food. As soon as the ghetto was closed, I know we were hungry and had nothing to eat. I was hungry anyway. Some people, you know, they stocked themselves up with food. They had some ways to get food, you know, and but we somehow didn't do it, you know. As soon as the supplies ran short, I was really hungry. No bread, no nothing.
From you say 42, it was a bit more calmer in the ghetto. There were no
From 1942 to 43, like I said, there was a theater there. They had some plays there, all kind of plays. They had ghetto songs. Even the Germans came to view it, you know.
No razzias?
Was there and here and there. There were some people, like somebody was caught, you know, on the gate bringing in something, you know, and the Gestapo was there. But not mass
execution.
Mass execution, mass actions, you know, actions were not there. It was like what they call a quiet period in the Vilna ghetto. That's how I saw it. That's how I felt it.
Did you know anything going on outside Vilna?
Well, I remember in 1943. I don't remember. It was summertime. I don't exactly know which month it was. Suddenly we got some people in the ghetto. They brought some people in the ghetto. They lived across the street from the house where the gates where we were, you know, the court where I lived inside, and across Rodnitska, We lived 14, I think it was 16 or something like that, or not 16, it was, I lived 14, I think it was odd number, 17 or something like that. I'm not sure what number. They had several hundred people there across, and the Jewish police were watching over them. These people were brought from the surrounding areas from Vilna. They called them the Nitige. They came from the country, surrounding towns, small towns and villages that were brought into the ghetto. And they were there for several weeks. They had food with them. They were much better fed than we were. And those people, they had more supplies. And the Jewish police were at that time. They put on hats, like officer hats, They looked like Germans' hats, And they gave them handguns, and they round up those people. They took him and they told them they'd taken him to a different area, a camp, and with the help of the Jewish police, they were taken to Ponar and killed and shot. These people, they were fooled by the ghetto administration. That I remember well. It was one of the dirty episodes that the Jewish police did in the Vilna ghetto. Further, this was in the summertime of 1943.
So they weren't really helping the Jews too much, the Polizianten.
The Polizianten were, each person, when you live in the ghetto, at that time everybody wants to stay alive. And they thought by being Polizianten, by being police, they had, first of all, they had more food, and they had better living quarters. They didn't live that bad as we did, in better conditions. And they also had better food. They didn't have to go out and work hard, slave labor, hard work. They did administrative work, they did police work there. They kept order in the ghetto. And that's what they, I don't know if they helped the Germans or not, but that instance when they took these people that came in from the surrounding towns in the ghetto, and they fooled them and took them out, like they were going to take them to a different area, to a different camp, and they brought them out there and helped the Gestapo take him to Ponar, This episode, I never forgave those police. I have, till today, a hate for those people. I really think they were supposed to take revenge on, because they weren't a good example for our Jewish people. Maybe some were all right, some policemen, but I didn't see that. Maybe I didn't see that the ones that were all right. I saw the ones that were bad there, near the gate there, that stayed at the gates, like Levas, one of them, Auerbach, I remember. Really bestial people with bad tempers, beat on the Jewish prisoners, in those people of the ghetto.
You as a child, besides the ones you stole the bread, you suffered from them too?
Not really. Not really. I didn't personally suffer from it. Only that time I had to run in with those police. But I saw what they did to the other people, the attitude they had, and the stories I heard, and also those people that came in through the gates with food there, and they used to shake him down, and if they found food with them on them. I remember my mother was once caught with some kind of little change in her pocket. She was beaten, with a hose over her back and her behind. I remember she couldn't sit down or lay down for a week or more. And one of the Jewish policemen did it because he felt that this way he could save her life. Otherwise, maybe the Gestapo that was right there would take her to the Gestapo there, headquarters, and have her tortured and executed afterwards, killed, murdered. So I don't know, if it saved her life or it didn't, I know she came back and she was blue and green and white and everything and hurt badly. I found a little change in her pocket and a few radishes. So I really don't have any sympathy for those people. That's it. They didn't bring any kavod, as they say, any honor to our people, those politicians in ghetto. And I told you why they were politicians, I think, you know.
Such a situation, everybody just cares for himself.
They care for themselves, and that's how I think 90% of those people in the ghetto cared. Each one wanted to save their own life. There's a situation, you know, look out for yourself.
In the apartment you lived, you have problems in this respect?
We had problems when I had two cousins, and my mother's sister, which was the same age as my mother. You know, she didn't have where to stay, and we brought her into the room to live with us in that room. And we had some problems with the rest of the people there, you know. But after a while, after day two, everything quieted down. There were sometimes, you know, sometimes here and there quarrels, but not serious. People learn to live with each other in these conditions. We had some nice people in that room. I remember Kavarski, the daughter and the mother, you know. That was her apartment before the war. She stayed in that was her original apartment. She lived in that area where the ghetto was. And she had supplies and everything, and I remember when she gave me a little piece of bread, you know, with a piece of with a garlic, onion, you know. I was a nice person. I think her daughter survived. Her older daughter survived her elder daughter. She had two daughters actually. She had a younger daughter and an elder daughter. I remember her. And her elder daughter went to the partisans and to the forests, and she survived. That's it. Further. And the ghetto life, like I said, with the theater there, and until 1943, this was in, they had like in in August 43, I think it was, they had, they were looking for Wittenberg. He was the leader of the partisans, you know, from the, I forgot how they call the PKO, I don't remember they had some kind of abbreviation. And they were looking for him, the Gestapo, and the whole ghetto was looking for him, because they said because of him they're going to liquidate the ghetto if they don't catch him, if he doesn't give himself up. And then finally he gave up, you know. He came out, and without a struggle, you know, he was dressed like a woman, and he came out by himself, you know, volunteered, and he was led out from the ghetto by the Gestapo, and he was tortured and committed suicide, as I understand it, later on. This happened in 1944. This happened, just before the liquidation of the ghetto, a couple months before. Then we had an incident also, you know. If you want to know about resistance in the ghetto, partisans.
What you know about?
Yeah,
how you encountered?
Yeah, I didn't see any resistance at all from the partisans in ghetto. I saw those people living in the ghetto, eating and sleeping there, and without going out to work even. And they used to get supplies, you know. I don't know what they did in the ghetto, but the ghetto didn't like them. We weren't sympathetic to them. The partisans there. They didn't save any Jews, you know, which I know about. In the ghetto, they didn't have any resistance there. And also those people that went out, the partisans were in the woods, organized, you know, battalions They didn't come out also and didn't attack any outposts, police outposts, or take revenge on Poles or Lithuanians that did all this dirty work for the Germans. So actually, I didn't see anything what the Partisans did in the ghetto and after the ghetto.
But you knew who belonged to them?
I knew some of the people that belonged to them. Young fellas, you know, women, men and women. I don't think they had any training, any military training whatsoever, you know. So also they didn't have any weapons that could do anything, you know, like maybe pistol handguns. So I really don't know, because looking at this now, I also looking at after the ghetto, you know, that they didn't do anything to resist, to make a resistance there, active resistance against the Germans, because we knew we were going to be killed anyway. But the Germans, you know, what, they had a system where one who got caught resisting, they took the whole family and killed them, and with the family it took maybe 50, 100 people. So people were also afraid to endanger other people, the family, and other prisoners, other ghetto people. So maybe I actually didn't see the Germans walked around in the ghetto free. The SS, the Gestapo, Murer, Kittel, Weiss. Nobody came up and nobody did nothing to them. They could have ran up somebody with a pistol and shoot them in the head. Anyway, they were. But like I said, maybe because they didn't do it, because they were afraid of the German revenge they would take on the families and other ghetto inmates. So let's go further from that standpoint, which I saw. Then in 1944 in August, September 44, they surrounded the ghetto, the Lithuanian
43.
SS, in 43. 43. In 43 I'm talking about. They surrounded the ghetto and they start grabbing men, mostly men, for Estonia, to work in labor camps in Estonia, concentration labor camps in Estonia. So certainly people didn't want to go, so they hid themselves, and my father also hid himself, went into the hideout, a Malina they called it.
He stopped going to work.
The ghetto was surrounded. Nobody went out to work. As soon as they surrounded the ghetto, nobody could leave, go out or in. The German and the Lithuanian SS surrounded the ghetto. And the Jewish police did this rounding up. The Yiddish Polizei, they call them. They gave them a quota, how many they needed. 3,000 men, 4,000, I don't remember exactly. And they start grabbing these men. I saw the episodes how one of the neighbors, you know, how they grabbed him, the Jewish police, you know, they had pistols in their hand. They had pistols, the Jewish police. And how they pointed a pistol to his head, one of our people that lived in our apartment. And he was taken, and then his 2 sons were taken. And by running around in the ghetto at that time, I saw where these hideouts were made, these Malinas were made. See, by going different places, you know, in different areas, different apartments. I went in and I saw. Being a boy, they didn't worry, they didn't think I saw, and noticed me. And I saw different hideouts. And there was one hideout that was in our yard there, which was another court haif, they call it, a hoif. How would you call a hoif in English?
A court.
A court, yes. And they went into that court, you know, and I used to go in there because the court went out to the outside ghetto, but they closed it there. The only way to go into that court was through our court, through our hoif. And I saw how they build a malina in a cellar there.
Who built that?
The people that lived in that court. I saw the family, how they built it. And I knew there was a malina there. And at the time when the aktie was on, for Estonia, my father came at night back to the apartment, and he says, I don't know where to hide. So I took him over there. You know? Going back at this, I just remembered, going before the Estonia, we didn't know who they were grabbing. A day before, we knew exactly they were grabbing men. We hid ourselves also in a hideout that I knew about. Also on the other side of the courthouse, of the court, where we lived. Where the cellars faced the outside of the ghetto. Anyway, I came and I took my parents over there, knowing where this hideout was. And we hid ourselves for that night. And we were there, and I remember there was candlelights inside that cellar, you know. And the candlelights, there was barely air there, that the candlelights weren't lit up. The fire went out from not enough air in the area. And all of a sudden, burst a pipe, buf, they call it.
From the sewage.
A sewage pipe bursted out. And we were half in sewage. We were there till the morning, and then we came out. My father, we found out they were catching only men. We went back to our apartment, washed up a little bit, cleaned ourselves. My father started hiding out in different places. 2 days I didn't see him. And then one evening, in the evening, he came at night. He came into the apartment. He said, I don't know already where to hide myself. So I knew another hideout. And in middle of the night, I took him over there. At 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe get up early, so nobody could see. Because otherwise they rush into that place, other Jewish people, and they would discover it. You know, the Jewish police would know where it was. I took him over there, and it was like an apartment in the kitchen. It was like a cupboard there, and through the cupboard they had a trap door downstairs, and they went down a flight of steps down there, hidden steps, and then they went out another hidden steps into the cellar. And that's where the hideout was, and that's where my father hid out for that Estonia. And I came with my mother there. Towards the end, we thought maybe we're going to grab also women. So a couple of days later, maybe a day or two later, my father sent somebody out to call us. And in the middle of the night, I also got up. This woman, that her husband was there, she took us into the hiding place, and we were there. I remember they gave us to eat in water. They put peas, hard peas. They put them in water so they get softer, and that's what I ate.
And there were many other people in that hiding place too?
Yes, there were. I think it was about 60 people there, in that big cellar there. And then they stopped, and then the aktie went over. They got the quota of the men. The ghetto was surrounded, still surrounded. There was no food. My father came out from that place. My two cousins were all hungry. He started looking for bread. And then he took me with him. And we were in the ghetto looking for some bread. And we found some people were baking bread. We bought a loaf of bread. It was still hot. And as we were running around in the ghetto, there was a little table outside standing there, and there was a woman that my father knew, and her boss, which was his name was Kolish, and a lot of people were surrounding that table, and he was writing a list of people. He was looking for people that were mechanics to go to work in HKP, because what happened, this Einhout HKP was, they had workers there, skilled workers, mechanics, and all kind of skilled workers, but they were taken away. A lot of them were taken away to Estonia. So he needed, she needed for that Einheit, for this place, he needed mechanics. This Meyer Plaga, he was in charge, German, Wehrmacht. I don't know why he did it. Maybe he wanted to save Jews, or they needed it for the war effort, to fix these trucks that came from the war. And they also changed from the trucks from gasoline to coal and steam run. They changed the motor there. It should run on coal and steam. So my father came up there, you know, and a lot of people bought themselves into this place. They gave gold, you know, I saw, you know. And this woman, young woman, she was a daughter of a partner, my father's, Strakun, which was in this expedition business my father had. And he told her in Polish, you know, I am a mechanic, you know that I had trucks, I know how to fix trucks. I know mechanical work. So he told this Mr. Kolish, this Herr Kolish, and he believed that his secretary, which was also his girlfriend, as I found out later, and they signed us up to go to HKP.
You too?
My father, myself, and my mother, and that's it. No cousins, no nothing. When we came back with the bread, you know, the hot bread, my father gave the bread, some of the bread to my two cousins, the two boys. One was older than me, one was a little younger. We told my mother that we were going to go to HKP to get the little belongings we have together. And my mother at that time didn't want to leave without her mother, without my grandmother. And I also didn't want to go without my grandmother. But we couldn't leave with my grandmother. Only my father, myself, and my mother. So we got our belongings, and this was the last truck out. And we got on the truck, you know, in September 1943, and we came to HKP. HKP had two big buildings there, large building blocks, 6 floors or 5 floors high. 6 floors, I think it was. And between the buildings was area, you know, like a yard, big yard there. They unloaded us on, and they started counting us and seeing who came. And also who didn't come legal, some were hidden in the truck. They took them right back into the ghetto. They loaded them up, and this what happened. This Kolish and his group, you know, he had right away his helpers, you know, like the police, Jewish police he had, you know, some of the Jewish police. Some called themselves Partizana, they were resistant fighters, you know, like they were the administration of HKP. Actually working, we had about 1,000 people there, you know. Maybe 150 were the actually mechanics. You know. We came and we were assigned a room on the last floor.
You were probably one of the smallest there.
There was children maybe 2 or 3 years younger than me too. There. We came to this HKP. The camp, they took us on a truck, and it seemed to me a long drive, but it was really not that far away, you know. We were taken to the HKP there. We were assigned later, we got unloaded, they started counting us and checking out who came. And we got assigned a room on the last floor, in the first entrance of the block from the right side. There's 2 blocks, one left side and one right side. And it was September, it was still warm. My father right away was went to work in a different area as a mechanic. He worked there. And my mother and I, we were in the camp. And my mother was also working in a shop where they fixed German Madim, no, uniforms. Fixed these uniforms for the Germans. Some people worked in carpenter shops. Some people worked over there in cleaning in the camp. And they had also a brigadier, like they call brigadier foreman, which was appointed by college, that took care of the work in the camp by itself. They made a latrine out there, up on the hill, outside the because their toilets facilities were not there. Now these 2 blocks, they were occupied beforehand, before we arrived there. They were occupied by women and children from prisoners of war, Russian prisoners of war. Russian, that were caught, didn't escape. In 1941. And we found over there cooked soup, still warm. They were just maybe a couple hours before, an hour or 2 before we arrived. They probably were taken and killed or something. I don't know what happened to them. These people lived over there. We were assigned to the last floor on the first entrance. And there was no windows in that room. The windows were out. Some windows were broken. And my mother fell sick. Winter came around, you know. We had to go outside for our daily things. We had to go. And we went outside, and I stood in line to get a little soup, a little food in the cellars there, where they fed us from their kitchen. And in charge were these Kolish and his people. And there was also a polician, or somebody took care of order, and stood hours in line to get a little soup, which was made out of peelings, or potato peelings, and I don't think there's any horse meat, maybe some there. And we would get some bread. Never an egg or butter, never. And that's how we lived there. My father went out to work. He came back after 6 weeks.
6 weeks you didn't see him?
I didn't see him for about 6 weeks. He went out to work and didn't return. And then I stayed with my mother all the time.
But what did you do all day long when your mother went to work?
My mother, or if she was sick, she was sick. Or I was running around the camp doing nothing, looking for food, looking for this, you know, watching people build these hideouts, you know.
They were also preparing hideouts there?
Yes, they were preparing hideouts there too. I watched those things. Also looking, always for food looking, you know. Where I heard some food was given out, I was there.
Who was there in charge of you? Lithuania or Lithuanians? Or
Lithuanians? The Lithuanians were the guards in the camp. They had strung up barbed wire. They had a wooden fence, which the first one we couldn't see nothing outside. They couldn't see in, we couldn't see out. Tall fence, maybe 3 meters high. 3.5, and then they had barbed wire with these outposts, you know, these outposts where they had these, they called it bochanes, you know, outposts, and tall outposts, where they had lights. A
watchtower?
Watchtowers, that's right. Watchtowers. They had between the wooden fence, and the barbed wire fence was about 2 meter area, 2.5 meters. 3 meters, and they had walking over there. They had guards, Lithuanian guards.
Germans you didn't see there?
Germans used to come in. The Golosheki, which was from the SS, he came in.
So what name?
His name was Golosheki. We gave him a name Golosheki because he had a bald head and a big neck. So they called him a name, you know. the inmates. I saw Germans in the main gate. I saw Germans. Saw Germans, but the Lithuanians were the main guards there. And they didn't interfere into the administration of the camp. The administration of the camp was done by the Jewish people there, by the Jewish administration, by Kodesh and his people. And some were so-called partisana, you know, which didn't see any resistance there too. They only ate and drank there, and had a good time with the women there, with the young girls, you know. I saw it as a child, you know. They didn't realize I saw it, you know. So they drank and ate our food, you know, that we were supplied, and we had to buy it back from them later on. My father used to come back from the afterwards, after the 6 weeks, he came back every week to take to the bath, excuse to take a bath, you know, for Sunday, not Saturday, Sunday. And he brought food with him at that time, you know, that he found that he outside, he brought in. And he also went out there and tried to buy food from those people from the magazine there, which was the warehouses there they had, you know. They had a cooperative, they called it themselves, a cooperative, where they had the food and they sold it back to us. Some people had money, had gold coins, they bought it. I remember my father had a suit, he hucked it in for that food, you know, for some food there, his suit.
So this Kalish didn't really help?
The who?
This Kalish didn't really help?
He was also like Gens was in the ghetto, you know, but he was the administrator. He didn't cooperate with the Germans. If you think you know, his administration was in the camp. And then my mother became very sick with asthma, and I had to. There was no toilet there. I told you in those apartment houses, the toilets were broken. The toilet was outside on a hill. You had to walk about 100 yards or so up on the hill. You know, they built a toilet there from wood, a lot of toilet seats. So I used to take my mother's, you know, tzarchim shela, as they could say, and take it downstairs, bring water up. We didn't have no running water from the they called it the well there, you know, a well where you brought the bucket down, you brought it back up. They had a well like that, and they also had a well where they pump and brought water, you know, up with a pump. Half a bucket I could take. I couldn't take any more. The buckets, not the plastic, they were made out of tin. And this was life day to day there in the ghetto, in the lager. No school. I didn't go to school there. I don't remember school that time. That from September to March 44. September 43 to March 44. And it was a struggle. We lived up on the last floor. Then my father got in the end of the winter. It wasn't the end of the winter. It was in February, or it was in January. It was so cold and so bad condition in that room there. My mother was so sick. They gave us another room on the first floor in the next building. On the other entrance from the other building, which had a stove in there and was warmer, and we're a small room. We were there with another family.
In one room?
We lived a room, the width of this room here, about 3 meters wide, about 5 meters long, 4 meters long.
And you had beds in there, or
4 meters long, 4 meters long. About 12 square meters, maybe less, you know. And we had a window there. We had a kitchen there in the beginning, stove. We had one family lived on the left side, and we lived on the right side. On the left, we lived on the if you walked in through the door, we lived on the left side. Another family lived, father, his son, and a daughter-in-law, and we three. Conditions were already a little better.
Beds you had there?
We had beds.
Mattresses?
We had the wooden beds, beds that the Russians left. The Russian women and children they left there.
Blankets?
We had a little bit of blankets, We did have. Some of the blankets were left over from the Russians there. We had blankets, old, very bad blankets. And we had a sheet there, not too much. Maybe 2 sheets, a couple of pillowcases, and one bed. And my mother and my father slept in one bed, and I slept on the other side there, from the beginning, in a little bed. So we lived over there. They changed us the apartment from the one on the last floor, where it was very cold and water was much, freezing there. I remember there was the walls were full of water, of ice. That's how cold it was. And we came to this room. It was already better. It's warm there. We used that stove to cook on, also to warm up the place. And then my father came every week, like I told you, to take a bath there. We had a bath there. They made a bath in that camp, like a public bath. And they had hot water. I remember the steam coming out from the sewage pipes, from the traps. And then the same routine, go get food, in the kitchens they had there. Stand in line, argue. A lot of things happened there. At one time I stood there almost the whole day waiting for soup. Then he told me there was nothing there left. From frustration I attacked that person. To me he looked like a big man. He was also a young fellow, maybe 20 years old, 18 years old. I attacked him and I grabbed him, and I was small, so I grabbed his leg like a wild animal, and I scratched him up, his face and everything. And then he couldn't get rid of me. He couldn't shake me off from the how angry I was, And he tried to beat me, and he couldn't get rid of me. Then another one ran up there and tore me off. And I told him, after the war, I'll catch you. I'm going to get even with you. Anyway, my father came back, and my father could beat him up, but if he beat him up, he probably
just get into trouble.
Big trouble. So, somehow we got over that.
And your mother?
My mother got better, much better. She started working again in the shop, fixing uniforms for the Germans. Slave work. And then
Did you hear anything what's going on outside, that a camp like Auschwitz exists?
No. I didn't know nothing about Auschwitz. I knew that was the ghetto of Vilna was liquidated. At that time we were there in the ghetto, in the camp, AKP. This was winter time. They caught a woman and a man outside the ghetto. They sat in the public park, and somebody informed that they're Jews, They pointed on them and they brought them back into the ghetto, into the camp. This was I think in December or October. I'm not sure what month it was. 1943.
How did they get out of the camp?
They were hidden out outside the ghetto, and they left it. They left their hideout somehow. I don't know. Anyway, they brought them back into the camp. The German Kittel, another German there, made made all the people go downstairs. I told my mother we're not going down. I hid my mother under the bed. That's when we lived in the other block yet.
And the first block, on the top floor.
The top floor. And I put her under the bed, and her asthma was, you heard the breathing, you know. I said, you stay there. I go outside, see what's going on. They had these men lined up, and they were in rows in that square where I told you where that Andarta stands, where that memorial is. And they had a hanging post made up of two posts and a crossbar. They strung up a rope, and they went to hang, and they called out a couple people from the group that were outside, the prisoners there, and they told them to take him and hang him. To hang this person. His name, I knew he had a nickname, Pajarnik. Somehow, I don't know why he had that nickname. And the woman was there too, standing there with the child, with her child. I don't think they were related. I thought at that time they were man and wife, but I found out later they weren't related. I saw it all from the top floor. I went into a different room from the window. Another room, not in the room we were living, another room which was not occupied. And I looked through the window there, and I saw the whole episode. And how they called out those people, 2 men from the group, to hang him up, and they hung him up, and the rope broke. According to international law, it should be freed, free men. The rope breaks. They hung him up again, the rope broke again. The rope probably was old, you know, and dry. And then the Germans made a motion that they should kneel. The man, the woman, and the child. And both Germans ran up with a pistol, took out the pistols, and they shot him right behind the ear. I saw that with my own eyes. This. Yes, and then they were told 2 men were taken out from the, couple men from the group there, and they dug up a hole. The hole was, I think, already dug up. And they dragged him over there near the fence, and they buried him. They buried the man, the woman, and the child into the same hole, the same ditch. And I remember I looked through the window, and they put on powder, you know, kind of what they call lye, to kill the stain, the smell, or to destroy the body. I don't know. It disinfected. Powder, and then they told them to bury it. I saw it with my own eyes from the top floor there, from the window. And then
how could you take this as a child?
I don't know. I saw these things, like I saw the things like that. You know, I had to see it. I don't know why I had to see it. I wanted to see it. It didn't bother me. It affected me somehow. I had fear inside, but I could look at it. I could look at it, actually. After that, you know, people were scared to go outside the lager, the camp, because they knew they were going to get caught. They had an example there. They would bring back and hang and shot. At that time also, we had some people that were caught in the ghetto. In the ghetto they had hideouts, and people hid themselves by the liquidatie from ghetto. They liquidated the ghetto a week after the HKP. See?
After you were taken to HKP?
They liquidated the ghetto. My grandmother died there, in the ghetto already. I don't really know what happened to the Jews, how they liquidated and what the procedure were. I don't really know. But I know one thing, that some afterwards, after the months afterwards, they were discovered in the ghetto, and some of them were taken back to us, to the camp. You know, were let into the camp. So we knew what went outside, told us the stories. We knew actually what happened.
Just remembered something. I wanted to ask you, when you were still in the ghetto,
yes.
were there ones that caught partisans which were hanged in the ghetto?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it. I heard that there was a resistance there, Glatzman or something like that from the Beitar movement. And he and a group of people were in a fierce battle, but I really don't know, because I didn't see it and I didn't hear about it. I told you before, I didn't see any resistance at all from anything in the Vilna ghetto, from the Partizana, in the ghetto. Also, I didn't think they attacked any outposts, any units inside Vilna. It was difficult too, to do that. And if the Partizana went into the woods, they had to take orders from the Russian commanders. So they weren't interested in risking Partizans' lives to save Jews. They did other work. They blew up trains, they blew up pylons, telegraph posts, stuff like that. Did sabotage. But they didn't go out there to try to save Jews. We'll go back to the camp. Can we make a little הפסקה? As I said, we lived when they did this. When I saw this horrible hanging, what happened, how they hung the person and they shot the man and the woman and the child. I actually saw the blood coming out from there, from the shot. And I saw how he went up to shoot them. How he did it with happiness. Not that he didn't want to do it. He did it with zest and gusto, to do it, He ran up and shot him. Told them to kneel, and they killed him right there. As I was saying, and my father came every week afterwards. And we lived in the other side of the block, in the first floor, where the condition was much better. It was warm in there. One day he came I used to come for Sunday, and Monday he went back to work. And he worked with Germans there. And at these shops, repair shops, which is outside the camp.
Outside the camp?
Yes. Repair shops were made out of corrugated tin, They worked outside, there was no heat. They were very bad conditions. They repaired and they overhauled trucks, and also overhauled them to use coal instead of gas. And at first he didn't know how to do it. My father told me that he worked with a group of men there. And he said he found a German manual. He read German, and according to the manual, he did because who saw about changing from gas to coal? This was something we didn't expect, He didn't expect it. He learned to do it, and they got real good in it, proficient. Anyway.
But how were his conditions there?
Conditions were, they got fed, but the work conditions was bad. They had to keep it. They worked very long hours and difficult. The Germans were very strict with them. One time, in his area where he worked, he found a match. The German found a match. He forced my father to pick it up with his mouth, the match, and he kicked him every time he didn't pick it up. They were subhumans, treated like subhumans, but they worked, and they had barracks where they slept there. They had a kitchen, and they organized themselves. They were cultural people. They knew how to organize, and all these mechanics, all these professionals, some were mechanics, some were other trades they had in that, and to repair cars and trucks. Too much I didn't know about it myself. What my father told me, he used to tell me about it, you know. But I knew the conditions were bad there. And sometimes, you know, he used to send food. The truck driver, a German, used to come to the camp with a truck, and sometimes he used to send. Sometimes a German that he fixed his truck well. He used to give him, you know, they were not SS. The trucks were Wehrmacht. So he gave him, you know, a tip. You know, he gave him something like some honey. Sometimes he sent back, you know,
some extra food.
You know, manashki they call it. Manashki of honey. Sometimes he sent cheese. Sometimes bread. To us in the camp, and I used to wait for that truck when it used to come from the workplace. They called it the workplace. I'll remember in a minute how they called it. Anyway, Panzerkaserne they called it.
Panzerkaserne.
Panzerkaserne. From Panzerkaserne they worked there, and they used to give him a tip, you know, the German. Like a human to human. And he sent the extra food to us through that German driver, which was also, that German driver looked like the dad of my neighbor that my little friend that I born next to his, we lived wall to wall. And this German looked like his father. And I used to look at him and I used to say, maybe that's his father, you know? Imagine like that, you know? Or Bobby's father. Bobby. Bobik, you know, they called him. And I thought, you know, but of course it wasn't, it was a German, you know. But he was very familiar to me, so, and a nice German too. This German here. Anyway, he came back on Sunday to the camp every Sunday, and he was supposed to leave on Monday morning, 6 o'clock, with the first truck. And he didn't leave for the first truck. He left with the second truck. He said, "I'm going to go wait till the second truck." Between the 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning, the SS surrounded, the Lithuanian SS, and Gestapo went inside the camp and started grabbing. We didn't know who they were grabbing at first. So my father took me. We were still sleeping in my nightgown. We wore a nightgown, and he didn't know what to do with me, you know. Then they found out they were grabbing children. So he took me to the attic, 5 floors up, on the attics. Over there was a attic with a tin roof, which was about 3 meters from the floor, with an opening in the tin roof, square opening, with a frame, wooden frame in the opening. The floor was sand, and there were beams there, wooden beams, wide beams, big, large beams. Zero?
Yes, so you went up to the attic.
Well, I wanted to start in the beginning that my name is Jakob Schwarzberg from Vilna. And when my father took me up to the attic in my nightgown, we didn't exactly know who the Germans were catching, grabbing, who they wanted. Then word got, people start talking, and we found out that they're catching children. It's a Kinderaktie, they call it. To take the children that are in the camp, that are not working, and execute them, kill them.
There were still a lot of children around at that time?
Yes, there were approximately 200 children in that camp at that time. That's what I think. I'm not sure that figure, but at least 200 children were in that camp. And he took me up to the attic, you know, from the first floor where we lived to the attic. It was about 5 floors up. And the attic was sand in there with beams, cross beams, big, heavy cross beams. I'm not going to go into the measurements because it's not relevant here. And at first, he actually didn't know what to do, where to hide me, because he was always working outside the camp, in the garages, which was called Panzerkaserne. And those people that lived in camp, they made hideouts. That worked and lived in the camp, they prepared hideouts. But since my father wasn't there most of the time, he came back once a week. On Sunday, he had no chance to build a hideout, and he didn't know what to do with me, where to hide me. That's why he took me up to the attic.
It means they were reckoning with such a thing happening?
Always, they had experience from the ghetto. The Jews already knew. The Eden there in the camp, the Jewish people, they already knew. Couldn't trust the Germans. You don't know what could happen. All of a sudden they can start liquidating, catching people, grabbing people. And in the camp, there was around 1,200 to 1,500 people in that camp. Most of these people were working in the camp. My mother too was working in a workshop, repairing uniforms, German uniforms. And my father was a mechanic. He became a mechanic, actually. I told already what happened, and he was repairing and overhauling trucks that came from the front. They also changed the trucks to diesels engines from gasoline, because there's shortage of gasoline, and the Germans made the diesel engine with coal operated, wooden coal operated. They would have a boiler on the truck, and they started out with the gasoline start with a carburetor, and then they would change over to. It was a procedure my father explained to me, but I actually really didn't care about how it worked,
You were at that time 9, 10 years old.
Yeah, I was about 9 years old then. Yeah. And so when he took me up to the attic, he first, he didn't know what to do. He actually was lost. So he tried to put me between those beams. The beams were at least a half a meter, 50 or 60 centimeters high. And they were about 40, 50 centimeters wide, maybe more, maybe 60 or 70 centimeters, heavy beams. And he put me between two beams, and he put all kind of stuff on top of me, junk that was on the attic, and he covered me with all that junk. And as he left, I got up. I said, I can't stay here. I am not be able to lay down here, lay between these two beams so long. I didn't know how long I had to live there, to be there, but I decided to get up. And I got up, and then he looked up. He didn't know what to do. Then he saw this opening in the roof, which was is a tin roof about a little more than 3 meters high from the floor, that covered the attic. And there was another boy there with a father. He told him, let's put the two boys upstairs, up on the roof. And the other father said, from that little boy, about my age, he didn't like the idea. He said, I'll catch him up there. Don't forget, it was in beginning of March. This was cold in Vilna.
March of the year 44.
1944. And it was really cold. And so he found a little blanket, old blanket in the attic. He put his boots on me and in my nightgown, and he took me by my legs, my feet, and he lifted me up, and he stood up on something there in the attic. And he lifted me up So I caught myself on the frame. There was a little frame opening to the roof on top, maybe 80 by 80 or meter by a meter. And I pulled myself up. And I went up on the roof. And he threw me a blanket. And I went behind the chimney there on the roof. It's very cold. And I covered myself with a blanket. I felt my feet were frozen, you know, after 15, 20 minutes on the roof. There was a chimney there, a broken chimney. And it started to get a little sunny already, but it was very cold. Because I remember I wanted to see how cold it was. I spit and it froze instantly. I remember that distinctly. And I was laying there and I heard these screams and cries. I didn't see nothing, but I heard these screams and cries and howls, and the Germans were screaming and the children were crying, and the mothers. All this was a mixture, like it was echoes, you know, from the acoustic echoes that I heard on the roof. And there was about I was on the roof there till it got dark already. But what happened, as I was laying on the roof, my blanket slipped, so I went down to get him. It was steep, very steep. It's not a flat roof, it's a thin roof, and it was steep. It had a slope, very slopey. And I went, and it's a big roof. It's not a small roof. It's a big, large roof. And I saw across, far away, after the camp, after the perimeter of the camp, the fence. After the fence, I actually didn't see the fence, but it's way out, because I was way high there, on the top floor on the roof of this building. I saw a couple kilometers out. And I saw children playing hopscotch, you know, in the sun. Polish children, free, playing, you know, in the sun. And after a while, they saw something move. Probably saw me there, because I went to get the blanket, and they started pointing. So I quickly went back underneath. I sat down right next to the broken chimney, and I covered myself, and I was asking God to save me, you know. I was saying, Gott in Yiddish, you know, I should be saved. And I started imagining all kind of things, you know, as I was laying there.
You didn't have anything, nothing to eat, nothing to drink?
Nothing. No
from
food.
Early morning?
From the early, like it was maybe 7 o'clock in the morning till afternoon. All this, I heard these screams and the hollering and the it was terrible what I heard, you know. And the air was clean, and the sun was bright, and it was a crisp, cold frost. I didn't have no desire to eat or drink. My heart was in my stomach from fear. I was very scared. And all the time I asked God to save me, you know. God knew, was me alem, help me. And this, I remember this, you know, it's very touchy, as you see. And then, as I saw, I stopped hearing the noises, the screaming, and I saw from far out, I saw maybe 12 or 15 trucks were going across the bridge. And I knew these trucks are from the camp. Convoy of trucks that were leaving the camp. Actually, I didn't see the gate from the camp because I was way up, way up there. And I didn't go to the edge because I would fall down. So I was in the middle of the roof where the chimneys were. So I saw around me, far out, but not close, around. And I decided, you know, my feet were so cold, I didn't feel my feet already. So I decided to take the blanket, and there was a nail in that opening, and I attached the blanket to the nail, and I slipped myself down maybe 2 meters, and then I jumped the rest. And I remember I didn't even feel my feet when I jumped. They were so frozen. And I went down, you know, I hid myself in the corner.
On that attic?
On the attic, in the corner of the attic. I came down from the roof because I saw that the aktie was over. And I decided to go down because no sense being up there, you know, it was cold. And I thought I was safe already to go and come down. As I hid myself in the corner of the attic, not too far from that opening, it was dark already on the attic. Nothing, you know, you can't see nothing. And there was an entrance, like a regular entrance, steps going up, and then there's a door there. I was in the wall, in the corner of the wall, in the corner. The wall from the outside and one from the staircase. And my father opened the door, you know, he went in, he looked up, and he saw the blanket, you know, hung from the from that opening on the nail. So he dropped on his knees, and he picked up his hands. It was very scary, you know, dramatic. And I said in Yiddish, "Tate," and he didn't know that he shook, you know, in surprised, you know. And then he took me right away and he said, "You go back on the roof. I'll put you back on the roof." And again he picked me up by my feet and put me back on the roof and put the blankets, and he said, "I'll come back, I'll bring you food, you stay on the roof. Too dangerous for you to come down, because a lot of people lost their children, and there'll be jealousy, and and he didn't want to take a chance." So he put me back on the roof, and I was out on the roof there a couple more hours. Then he came back with some food, water, and he had like a big coat, you know, on him. You know, he brought me a sweater, you know, and I had his boots, you know. He was barefooted. Then he came back. He had some shoes already, you know. And as I recall, he gave me some water to drink and a piece of bread, and I ate. I drank first and I ate. And he took me into the coat, big coat he had, like a coat de la Polarina, you know, like a poncho, like a Sherlock Holmes coat, something like that, you know.
A lining from inside, a warm lining from inside?
No, big coat, you know, like a Sherlock Holmes with the hood, you know. He had a coat like that, big white coat. He was, you know, being in the camp, he was thin, you know. Nobody was fat over there. He was always hungry. I was also nothing, only bones and skins and bones, nothing. So he put me in front of him. I held by his neck. He covered me with a coat, and he brought me down. He brought me down to the first floor. At the first floor, he took me to a neighbor. A couple rooms after we lived. You know, we lived on the first floor, and the first floor, each apartment was a room, one room apartment. But this man, he had 2-room apartment. He was the supervisor, like a supervisor, not a couple. He was a work manager or foreman in the camp, working with people there. He had a couple hundred people working with him. This man, I don't remember his name, and he had also 2 children. And they put me in. They had a hideout. They made a hideout. That man, that foreman, and he let my father. He let my father. He took me over there. You know, my father wasn't working with him. My father worked outside the camp. And he, for some reason, he helped my father. He let my father put me in one of those windows. They took out the blocks from the inside of the wall was about 80 centimeters wide. So they took out the blocks, you know, the little square blocks. They took them out, you know. How do you call Levanim?
Bricks.
Bricks, that's right. They took the bricks out from inside, and they left only the window was about 80 centimeter wide, and they had a window sill on it from wood. And the window sill was 2 parts. One was 40 centimeters, and the other one about that, where you could separate them. You know, so they took this one window sill out. They took all these bricks out, and only the outside wall was left, and the inside wall was left, and the side, of course, you know, the side. This wall was the outside wall was like I said, 80 centimeters wide or more, maybe. It's an old building, and I sat in that. They put me in that, you know, place, a hollow place that was bricks were taken out, and the first time since I was in that camp, maybe several months, the woman made me a egg, you know, they call it in Yiddish a feinkochen, scrambled eggs, and she gave me with butter, bread and butter. I haven't seen that for months, you know, with some warm tea to drink, and I was there in that window for the whole night by a neighbor. In this meantime, my father and a relative of my mother that worked in this camp, he worked with this relative, was a cousin of my mother's. He worked with this foreman, you know, and he did these windows for him, you know. So he also made a window like that for me, a hideout. It took him the whole night almost to do it, and they brought me at night from that room there, that small apartment, to our room where we lived.
Mm-hmm. So how was it covered from on top?
On top was a window sill, you know, board.
Mm-hmm. A wooden board?
A wooden board was there before, maybe 10 centimeters wide or 8, you know, that board. And when I went in, they just moved back. I went inside there. It was not just enough room for me to stand, to bend over, you know. It was about maybe 80 centimeters high, you know, inside, maybe less. I couldn't stand up there. I had to be bent over when I sat there. And I was hidden there in that hideout, in this window. I was there for almost 4 months.
Day and night?
At night they used to come out. In the beginning, no. In the beginning, no, they didn't. In our room, our room was a small room. It's a little wider than this, and maybe twice as long as this room here. A little wider. And we had our bed on this side, my bed and my mother, and this side, and the entrance was one door, one window there, only one window. It's a big window, and there was another family on the right-hand side. He was a lawyer, advocate, an older person, and his wife, and his son and his wife. I remember both of them were called Lala. That's why I do remember. And they spoke only in Polish. They were assimilated Jews, you know. And that these people knew that I was safe, and my cousin, my mother's cousin. Nobody else knew that I survived, that I'm alive.
So would you day sitting in that?
And I was sitting in that
long?
hole, you know, and there they would I would make my things there, you know, what I had to do, you know. They would put a pot in there. My mother put a pot in there. She went to work. She leave me there, closed, you know. And I would sit there, and the only thing I saw outside was the little cracks in the bricks on the outside. Oh, little cracks, little pinpoint cracks, and birds would sit from the other side. You know, this was a rough wall, you know, from the other side too. Old building with bricks. Some bricks was taken out, so birds sat there. And I thought to myself, I want to be a bird. I want to fly away. I want to be free. I had always thoughts. You know, I was sitting there, I couldn't read nothing, I couldn't see nothing. And I sat there and I moved this way and I moved that way, and always in imaginations. I was imagining different things. When I was a child, how it was, you know, we used to go to the dacha in Vilna, how I enjoyed myself when I was little. I went to swim, I went to the kindergarten, my friends, this went through my history as a child, you know, all these incidents in the ghetto, what happened, you know, and what I saw in the ghetto, and what all these little incidents were all in my head, you know, moving, you know, dreaming, thinking. And I was there for like this for 4 months in there. And later on, about the last month, had a little more courage. They took me out, you know, they let me stay out, you know, already.
In the room? In
the room, yes. I even ventured out into the hallway. I ventured out, you know, it was already, the Russian front was already close, you know. And that was the situation.
So officially you went there. So
I wasn't in camp. I was actually taken away with the rest of the children. Some mothers, the way I heard from my parents and other people said, some mothers would take the children, you know, when the action was going on, when the Lithuanian SS and the Germans were catching the children and looking for them, bringing them down, throw them into the truck. Some mothers would go with the children. And some others would just take the children's hands and break them open and leave them there and go. There was this kind of mothers and that kind of mothers, you know. And I couldn't understand how a mother could leave a child, you know. My mother wouldn't. And it bothered me, you know. Some of the children I remembered, I knew. And the last month of the, like I was talking about, when we ventured out already, they already made a kindermaline in that Hakape and in our building. There were 2 buildings there, 2 large buildings. Each one was 5 floors. They called them the Billige Häuser. That's where the camp was. And
that was the last razzia they made?
It's the last razzia before the liquidation of the camp. And they caught people there, but individuals, but no aktia, no taking people to death in a mess. The last month or so, before the liquidation of the camp, they made on the 3rd or the 4th floor, they made a kindermaline. Some people there, a hideout. They called it the kindermaline because we used to go up there. The children that survived in that building used to go up there and stay in that room and study and read a little bit, and somebody from the grown-ups would come and teach us, you know, Yiddish. How did they make the maline? How did they do it? they took this was the last room on the corridor. The last room, and there was another room there. There was the last room and that where the windows were. And there's in the end there was another room that went to the end of the building on the right side, on that fourth floor. And they bricked in that room, the entrance. The room next to it, which was the end room, was also closed up, and they put a stove, a big brick stove, you know, in the entrance to that room. The door they bricked up. So they had one room and another room.
So how did you get into that room?
Okay, from a room that was next to it. They had a big wall, big stove, and through the cooker, you know, where they had the stove, they had on top, they had what they call a ranch, like they called, where they had the different places to cook, you know, with wood. There was also a chimney there. That's where the chimney was, you know, for that room. Each room had that kind of situation, and the entrance to the room was through this called it a duchovke in Yiddish.
The fireplace.
It's not a fireplace. It's where they bake. The bake area. The fireplace was there. There was like 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 or 6, you know, cooking places with where they cooked, you know, like a range, cooking range, and they had what they call the baking area. Called it Yiddish duchovke. And through this duchovke was the entrance into that room. You had to crawl inside. This how you had to go inside into that room, 2 rooms. They called it the Kindermaline. The children that survived, maybe 15 children survived in that building, approximately. It would come up there in the morning, and they would play there. And we also ventured back up on the roof too, you know. Some of the kids, boys, we ventured up on the roof to see how the roof looked, you know. So we went up to the roof several times, and with other boys, you know.
You were not afraid of being cold?
It was already, you know, like the last month already, you know. We already dared to go out there. There was another 4 or 5 boys from the same family. The 3 sisters one had 2 boys, and I met them now in Israel. I didn't see him the whole time. I knew they were there, you know. Einat, Aaron Einat, and Kremer, and his brother, Aaron's brother. Anyway, I just met his brother, Einat's brother. They weren't called Einat. There was 3 sisters, and they had these boys, you know. They had no husbands, and they were also in Hakapé, and they came from the same area where my father was born, Antokol in Vilna. So my father knew the mothers, you know. And besides going to this Kindermaline, we went up to the attic, and we were looking down to see what's going on there. It was already summertime. This is already in June or something like that, or May. And this happened in beginning of March, so it's about 3 months later, 4 months, 3 months later. And was all, you know, the nice bloom. You know, we looked at the trees, and seeing any trees, you know, we looked at the grass down from the attic, not on the roof anymore. We were on the attic, and as the entrance to the attic, you have a door, right? And you have a small attic. From this attic to the other attic, they had like a doorway, a staircase with a door. And there's a small attic. Where I hid that time, when I was when I went down from the roof, when I slid down with that blanket, we opened up some bricks in the corner, and we between the two attics were also opening, you know, like a halal, they call it. How they call the opening like that? A void like that, you know. How would you call it? In Hebrew they call it halal. Okay, anyway, you know, like enough space, no, you couldn't even stand up there because you would touch right away the roof.
The ceiling.
Ceiling of the roof. The roof. The roof was made out of tin. And they had a beam there going across higher up. So you can only crawl there or stand up. We kids would get along all right there, but a grown-up was very difficult. And we cut through. I didn't. The other two boys, three boys cut with a saw. They cut through this big fat beam. And you know, and they cut it through so we can go through, you know, on top, higher. And this was a hideout. You know, this is a hideout in case they came looking for us or somebody. We would run inside there. From the when we were playing in the attic.
They ever come?
Nobody came. No, nobody came. Nobody came looking for us or trying to catch us. This was evident already. There was to the end already. You know, the people got used to their children. They lost their children, those parents. You know, the envy wasn't there, the jealousy anymore, I think. They decided this is the Goral. This is their luck, you know, this is their potluck, as they say. This is it. Who survived, survived. As time heals.
This other boy who was hiding with you first in the attic, he survived?
Yes. Those in the attic,
yes.
They all survived. I'll tell you about how it happened.
That first one, I mean, the first time your father took you up, you said there was another father
No, I
with
don't
this
know.
boy.
I don't know what happened to him. I don't really know what happened to him. I think he didn't survive. I think they took that little boy away. I doubted that he survived. Anyway, I'll go back to this. And that's how we spend our days, you know. And then there was a little bit more food already, you know, towards the end. And the Russian front was closer, getting closer. Some people had radio, not in the camp, but they heard. They went outside the work. They heard the Russians were already close by, not too far, you know, 200-300 kilometers from Vilna. And they knew the end was going to come soon. So one day, you know, the Germans and the Lithuanians that were there, the Lithuanians they are the guards. And there was a fence, and did I tell you what kind of fence was around the camp? Well, before the Kinderaktie, you know, we were free out there. We were playing in snows and sleds, going down, you know, in the camp. And the toilet was a public toilet way up on the hill. They built a public toilet, and to go about 400 meters to the toilet there. Yeah. Public toilet. And this is way up there. I don't know if I told also the incident when they caught those people and hung them. Did I tell you that?
I don't remember.
Anyway, let's go back now to this area. The actual life was towards the end was much more open, and also the last month of the camp or so, we got another member in our room. They caught outside the camp. They caught a Jewish person that converted to Christianity, and he lived with his wife outside. And somebody probably informed on him, and they threw him into the camp. And he was also a lawyer, a friend of these people that were with us in the room. And I heard them talk, you know, when they're talking there, that finally he came and he's free now. This this person that they caught, and he wasn't an old person, was in the 50s or something like that, maybe less. He converted way back, you know, maybe 30 years before, or 25 years. He became a goy, a Christian. And then when he was thrown in, his wife used to come to the camp gates, try to put some food inside for him. And he finally thought, you know, he said to, in Polish, he said that he's finally free. Whatever happens, it happens, but he's finally free here in the camp, in the slave labor camp. And he cleaned the streets with this other lawyer. The other lawyer said he's cleaning the streets and all that. He doesn't want to be in any authority, because when the liberation comes, he doesn't want to suffer any persecution by the liberators, that he was a collaborator. So he cleaned streets in Jose. He swept the floor, the streets, and cleaned, and that's what his job was, you know. I'll go back again to the story. What I was about the last month or so. You have any questions?
Did you have any special incident you wanted to talk about the fence?
Yes, I want to tell you how the fence looked. The fence around the fence around the camp was made out of boards, wood boards, from wooden fence, wood boards. It was about 3 meters, maybe higher, and maybe higher than 3 meters tall, you know, high. And they had another fence made out of barbed wire, which was also
outside this wooden.
Was inside. Is the wooden fence one? What I saw, and then another fence about 3 meters further up was another fence, 3.5, 4 meters, with another fence made of barbed wire. So they had that wooden fence nobody could see in or out, and the other fence was the barbed wire fence, you couldn't go through it. They had guards between this fence, the outside wooden fence, board fence, to the barbed wire fence. They had pillars, you know, watchtowers around every 30, 40 meters, a watchtower with searchlights, and inside they had guards walking, and were guards up on top.
These were Lithuanians?
Lithuanians, mostly Lithuanians. Some had dogs, some without dogs. They were mixed, mostly Lithuanian guards. And the in charge were some German sergeants. That's what they had. We tried to talk. There was another boy that used to be with me. This was all before the Kinderaktie I'm talking about. He knew a little bit of Lithuanian, this boy. His father also was a mechanic working with my father. So he tried it. He was about the same age, but he was smaller than me. And he talked to those guards. They liked him for some reason. You know, they talked to him, to this little boy. And I never had any chance to talk to him. I was like, wasn't scared but I didn't care talking to them.
So what were the children then doing all day long? Just playing?
Before
the Kinderaktie?
Before the Kinderaktie, they had this like a one-room school, you know. They had that one-room school like they had when they made that Kindermarline. In one building, they had another one in the other building. We used to learn a little bit of writing, a little bit of reading in Yiddish. Sometimes the Harav Farber was Zichron Levracha. He was also there. He worked with my father. He learned a little bit of Chumash with this. Some religious people would teach little children Chumash, the boys. That's it. That was the essence, the main thing what we were doing. And we were outside playing afterwards, you know. outside, running around. Too much, wasn't to do there. Parents were working, my mother was working in that, and they call it a Warstadt, where they fixed uniforms,
You said before they hanged people?
Yeah, they caught some people outside the camp in the main street in Vilna.
Who had escaped?
That they didn't escape. They were probably after the liquidation of the ghetto. They were hiding out somewhere, and they came out. I actually didn't know where but they brought them back to the camp. They caught a mother, the mother and a little daughter, and another person, which wasn't, I don't know if it was related or, called them the Pajarnik, I remember. And the SS came. There was the SS Mura. Mura was the SS. And another one was there. I remember that name, Mura. Kittel.
Kittel.
Kittel. Was also Kittel there. Did I talk about it?
Yes, and Weiss.
And Weiss, right. Weiss. That's right. Did I mention Mura? Yeah. And then that's the story, probably. And they took out, they told all the people to go and come down. They made like an appel, what they call it. And they took all the people downstairs. But I never went down. My father gave me instruction never to come down. I hid my mother underneath the bed. She had asthma and she breathed very heavy. I think I told you already that story.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
Yes.
When I saw when they hung those people, and then they fell down from the rope. They tried to hang the men. They picked 2 people out from the group, and they were supposed to hang him. From the group that were standing there, Jewish people, and I think I told you that, right?
So.
If I mentioned Mura and Weiss and Kittel, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they brought them in from outside into the camp?
Into the camp, and they showed what happened to people that are caught outside. So probably were one of the Polish or Lithuanian recognized them they were Jewish. Even a boy would call Żyd, and the Gestapo would take him right away.
From the camp itself, nobody escaped?
Some people, it was easy to go out of the camp, but where could they go? What can I tell you? I met here a woman after we came to Israel, and this was 1970, that was a partisan. Her name was Zelda Trager. I'll go back to the story from the camp. And this woman told me that she made rendezvous. Rendezvous, you know what that means?
Yeah, she arranged to meet.
Arranged to meet people from the camp that should go out to the Partizana, young men and women. And they wouldn't show up, they wouldn't go out. And she risked her life to come out, to go through enemy territory. She was like a guide to take him to the woods, to the Partizana, Atrad, they call it, battalions. And they just for some reason didn't go outside. It was very easy to go outside the camp because trucks were going always in and out. Always could go out. They felt people were scared to go out. People were scared to go to the Partizana because the young people knew that they had to fight in the Partizana. They liable to get killed. And they had more confidence staying in the camp, thinking they were going to... Most of these young people were... they were the policemen there. They were in charge of guarding they worked in the kitchen, the warehouses. They were one of the administration of Kolish and his group. They lived well, didn't do nothing, and ate and drank, So why go out? Why go risk life, This Zelda Trager told me that, I didn't know it beforehand. I know and someone had pistols, and but they just... It was very easy to go outside the camp. It wasn't difficult at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back now to the, what else you'd like to know?
That's more or less, if you still have some more to add from the time in the camp.
Yes, I could tell you more. What I could tell you about the camp and the life inside the camp, that everyone was out for themselves. People have made hideouts, they didn't want other people to know about it. And if they knew about it, they had to pay money to go inside there, you know. As a kid, you know, boy, I saw all these hideouts when they were, you know, working on them, running around there, you know. And I knew exactly how to go inside there. But I knew there was a hideout there, because just couldn't hide this, you know, from people inside living there. And I'll go back now to the when I continue with my story here. Then the Germans, you know, they decided that they were going to evacuate the camp, they call it. Evacuate the people. And my dad, you know, my mother, and all the other people, you know, knew that this, and I myself, I knew this was no evacuation. This is taking us to be murdered, you know, somewhere in Panar or wherever they would do it. So we decided we're not going nowhere. We're going to hide inside. The front was very close already. This is in June. July, June. It was very close already. Maybe the Russians were already 100 kilometers from Vilna. They were already past Minsk, which was the front from the Russian side. And the Germans were already hastily, you know, trying to pack up. So they decided to evacuate. And we were not going to evacuate, but the Kolish and his group, Kolish, we had about 200 to maybe 400 people. They were, this Kolish, that was the head of the camp, the director of the camp, the Jewish director, and all his people that were with him, Kolish. They loaded them up on trucks. They were supposed to evacuate them further up, away, toward Germany, because they're productive. And some of those guys, people, you know, some of those people, men, had pistols with them, you know, and they also evacuated. And what they did with them, that I found out afterwards, after a couple of weeks afterwards, they were all shot in Panar. With their pistols or no?
With this college together?
With Kolish, no, these people were shot, taken over there to Panar, and they were shot, murdered there. Now what we did, I knew there was a hideout. I knew there was a hideout in the cellar where the partisans were digging a tunnel. So I took my mother, you know, and I went down there. My father, he stayed up. He stayed. He didn't go down. My father was a very capable man. He was also an officer in the Polish army. You know, he was very capable. He knew. It was also luck, you know, but he had a good head on his shoulder. He knew exactly what to do. And he stood up. He didn't go down to that tunnel. My mother went down to the tunnel. There were already people there, sitting there under candlelight. And the air was very thick. There's no breathing there. There were water there, but who wanted to drink or wanted to eat, you know? There was nobody. I wasn't hungry or thirsty. And we were there for about 4 or 5 hours, and the candle started dimming from not enough air. And my mother, with her asthma, couldn't breathe, You know, this was already getting dark, and this was the first day when they were liquidating the camp, where the other coalitionist group went on the trucks and left, and they start looking for the people, you know, who was still there.
There's already the Germans.
The Germans, the Lithuanians, and we were in that tunnel, and my mother said she couldn't breathe, so I decided to take my mother out of there. So I went outside, back in, from the cellar. There was, how was this tunnel made? They had in the cellar they had a cement floor, and they made it so the cement floor moves on wheels, and there's an opening, you know, enough for people to go down with a ladder. They were supposed to dig about 400 meters from that spot underneath the gates of the camp. They were stuck there. Maybe they had to dig maybe another 50 meters over there. And how did I know it was a tunnel? That they used to take the sand out, and they used to deposit it outside. And I used to see always higher and higher sand. So one day I decided to see where they're digging. So I knew there was a tunnel there. So they had to let us in. There also, everything was, you had to pay money to go in, you know, or you had to be one of them, one of the group, you know.
Where were they piling up this sand? On
Outside.
the outside?
On the outside, yeah.
Of the camp?
Yeah, outside the camp. Outside, there was like steps going up, you know, like.
Nobody noticed that they've
They
been working
piling up
there?
slowly, and it was sand there. They're piling up slowly, you know. The Lithuanians didn't go. They were watching around the watchtowers. They didn't go and look, you know. And nobody informed. You know, they take the sand out, you know, in the pockets, little bags, you know, fur out. It's a big area. There's enough place to put a lot of sand there. There's like steep, you know, little, you know. There was no problem getting rid of the sand. I took my mother out, and I don't know if we saw my father or not. My father was looking, you know, he was outside, seeing what the situation was, what's happening. And this was getting dark. So I took my mother up to the Kindermarline. There was windows there, and we went into the Kindermarline through this cooker, the stove. Went into the Kindermarline and we sat there, and we were there, and my father, I didn't know where my father was. And I sat there with my mother, you know, everybody was sitting down. There was a big, you know, a shelf with bread near the window, big shelf, loaded with square breads. I remember that, the breads well, you know.
Who have prepared that?
You know, they had plenty of bread there, you know. And also they had a, you know, the toilet was like a closed, you know, little area with what they call it, curtains, you know, closed in curtains, like, and they had a big bucket there, and that's where everybody went. And the place was packed, full of people, women, children, men, all laying there on the floor. It was hot. The window was open. Nobody was outside already. They start catching people, you know, taking them away. And then I was sitting there, and my mother was in that little room, and I was sitting there in the big room, waiting to see what happened to my father. And then this was already a lot of hours. It was the middle of the night already. My father banged there on that little, in the place, and they put a pillow against it, you know, she wouldn't hear, against the outside. But they had it closed up, you know, a little door closed up, and they put a pillow there. And he went inside it. He knew the place. He knew how to get it. He knew it. And he banged there, and they opened up, and they said, "Who is this? Schwarzberg." He went in. I saw my father. I was very happy to see him. You know, felt very, very relieved. And then we were sitting, you know, in that room, in that Kindermarline, with all these people, with hot in there. And all of a sudden, this shelf with the bread fell down. And it made a big boom, you know, like fell down. And they start shooting into the window from the outside. The SS there, the Germans, with the Lithuanians start shooting into the window. The window was way over the window was on top. It wasn't a window in the bottom, there was a top window, like a top sliding window, or open window, I don't know, but it wasn't in the bottom, where you could look down. To see through the window, you had to get up on a ladder. And my father, was sitting there with another mechanic that I saw that his little boy was talking to the Lithuanian guards. He worked with him together, and he said, told my father, let's go out from there, not panic. I know a way to go through there's a workshop downstairs. Yeah, they have workshops there. I know how to get there and through a window and go into a garden and then escape. But don't take nobody else, he told my father. Don't take nobody else. His son and his wife, and my mother was sitting in the other room with another young woman. So I told my father, says, go tell your mother, mother that we're going to leave here. Slowly, not to panic, because if you go start panicking through this entrance, people get killed, choked to death. So I went to my mother, and I told her, you come out after me. We're going to leave. And that young woman, about 19, 20 years old, she went with my mother too. And we went all out. We went through this, stove outside, and we went to the corridor. This was on the 4th floor. I wanted to mention to you that each floor was about 3.5 meters high. It's like here, almost like 2 floors. They had 1 floor, and then next floor, and in the middle they had like a toilet there, It's very high between floors. I say the 5-story building there must have looked to me like a 10-story building. It was high, and the ceilings were very high. So we went out to the corridor, and this man with his son used to talk to the Lithuanians, got very angry at my father. Why this woman is also going? Why? So my father told him, she went with my wife. Anyway, he gave him a slap from anger. I remember that. He gave him a slap, yeah. And my mother wanted to go to the toilet, so she went in one of those rooms, to go into the toilet there. She went into the rooms, and I stood there by the door that we shouldn't get lost. This was dark in the middle of the night. And he and my father was also there in the corridor. My father, he was, when he got slapped him, he became, I don't know, like, he didn't do nothing to him back, because, what's going to argue with him here? But he was like, hurt, frustrated, Then, all of a sudden, we turn around, he is gone with this woman, with this young woman, his wife, the mechanic, and his child. They're gone. About 5-10 minutes later, we hear machine gun fire. And they went through downstairs. They got caught and shot on the spot. These people, when they tried to get from the building to the workplaces. I said to my father, look, I said to him, let's go downstairs, And so we start going downstairs. I was without shoes. When I left this kindergarten, I had wooden shoes on. They called it klumpes. And I took the shoes off. And I didn't have any shoes. I was barefooted.